Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Rebecca Hulsey. Today, I'm going to be looking at exploring Web 3.0 and its history, along with the idea of collectivist learning. My presentation is going to look at three main points. What is Web 3.0, along with the technical features and instructional benefits? What is connectivist learning? And finally, how does Web 3.0 leverage connectivist learning in current education? So the first thing I want to look at is the evolution of the web. To understand Web 3.0, we really do need to look back at how this was created and the history and development of this program. So Web 1.0 started with the idea of the World Wide Web. That old URL www. Was this program. This was created by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989, and this was essentially the read-only era of web search. Websites were very static, and users could only consume the information, not interact. Think of this as like an online library where you could read, but again, not interact with the material. The thing that I kind of associate this with whenever I think back to my school days is like Yahoo News, where I could go on. That was the first thing popped up whenever I pulled up my web browser. I could read articles, but it was not interactive. It was just more just a reading source. Web 2.0 was developed in the early 2000s, and it began with the introduction of social media, blogs, and collaboration tools. This was essentially the read-write era of web search. Users could create, comment, share, and learning became more participatory through platforms like YouTube, Wikipedia, and Google Docs. When I think back again, this was that introduction of the MySpace era. And while at the time we thought it was so innovative and so neat that we could interact with our friends and share music and photos and everything, when we compare it to the searches now, it was very basic. It was read, write, and that is it. It was not interactive other than sharing a few posts. Now we move into the Web 3.0 era. This is often called the semantic web. This builds on the foundations of the previous Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. It's powered by artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, and decentralized networks. Essentially, Web 3.0 aims to make the internet not just interactive, but intelligent, where systems understand context, personal experiences, and return the control back to its users. This is our current systems, our AI systems. Think like your Facebook now. While Facebook is still was started essentially in the Web 2.0 era, it has now developed into more of an interactive. AI and data is collected through this program to then return back to us more of what we already consume, like the ads that you'll see for books, movies, interactive websites, everything that you can see. It then comes back to you to be able to then look into these ideas that you've already kind of interacted with. It's also how we develop a lot of the programs we now use in schools that are AI driven, like DFID AI that I spoke to in my last presentation. If it wasn't for that development and that change into a more interactive and collaborative feature and that intelligence that is created, we would not have some of the technology that we have in schools today. So for this next section, we're going to look a little bit more in depth about what Web 3.0 is. So according to our readings, Web 3.0 is represented as the next phase of the internet. It's a decentralized, AI-driven, and user-owned phase. Its key features included semantic understanding, which is the idea that the web can understand the meaning of information, not just keywords. Also, it is defined by artificial intelligence. AI agents help filter, curate, and personalize content to the individual using the program. Decentralization, which is the idea that instead of relying on big platforms, data is stored securely on distributed networks, often through blockchains. Interoperability, which is the idea that devices and platforms communicate seamlessly through the Internet of Things. This idea that it's all interrelated and you can work within that internet. And then the idea of 3D and immersive environments. This is virtual and augmented reality, which we looked at in our first module, and has these VR and AR tools to create new spaces for interaction. When we look back, I did XR pedagogy as one of my my program for my case study. Without this idea of Web 3.0, those programs would not exist or not work. You have to have these idea of these created spaces utilizing these Web 3.0 strategies to have these programs in place. These features combine to make learning experiences more personalized, transparent, and connected. We saw this within our augmented reality. This creation of these experiences really lets students step into an environment and feel connected to the material we're teaching, not just a reading and trying to figure out what this could have meant. Next, let's look at the instructional benefits of this creation of Web 3.0. In education, these technologies create several powerful instructional benefits. The first being this idea of personalized learning. AI-driven systems can adapt content based on the learner's strengths and gaps, much like adaptive learning software, but across multiple platforms. When we look back at our modules, the program that I utilized last of Diffit AI was a prime example of this. I could take the material that I was creating in Diffit and I could adjust it to the grade level. I could adjust it to the language. I could adjust it in ways that I myself would not be able to do to help make my learning in my classroom more personal. The second idea of this instructional benefit is the idea of ownership and authenticity. With blockchain, students can hold verifiable digital credentials, certificates, or micro-credentials that are tamper-proof and portable. Third, this creates a collaborative learning network. Decentralized platforms allow learners and educators to connect globally without being tied to one institution system. There's so much out there in this world, and especially when I look at history, without this interconnectivity and this ability to connect to other platforms across multiple nations, my students wouldn't really see the global effect of a lot of our topics. So having this collaborative learning network where I can link my students to resources in other countries, learning archives over in the UK or in Africa or in Australia, in China, all these different avenues really does make the learning a lot more beneficial. The final instructional benefit is the idea of immersive learning. 3D and metaverse environments can support simulation-based learning from virtual labs to interactive history spaces like we spoke about earlier that extend beyond the traditional classroom. In short, Web 3.0 supports an autonomous, personalized, and participatory learning ecosystem. We want our students engaging. We want them doing self-exploration and really becoming these critical thinkers. And the idea of Web 3.0 and what it will provide really leans into that if used appropriately. The next section that I want to look at is the idea of what is connectivist learning. We've looked at Web 3.0, but now let's shift into this idea of connectivist learning that was developed by George Simons and Stephen Downes. Connectivism suggests that learning happens not just inside our minds, but across networks of people, information sources, and technology. It emphasizes that knowledge is distributed and that key skills is not just memorizing facts, but learning how to connect those ideas and find relevant information when needed. According to our readings, there were 4 main principles for this theory. The first one is that learning occurs through connections and across networks. Knowledge can reside in non-human appliances like AI or databases. Maintaining and nurturing these connections is critical for continued learning, and the ability to recognize patterns and relationships between ideas is more valuable than just rote recall. In essence, connectivism reframes learning as a process of connecting, not collecting. I think this is so important, especially whenever I relate it back to our history classes, is history is more than just dates and facts. History is people and emotions and connections and day-to-day lives. With this idea of connectivist learning in Web 3.0, we look back at our AI sources that we learned in the beginning with XR and AR. When we can put our kids in the lives that these people led, it creates a well-rounded lesson. Students are not just thinking that history is just some old guys in white wigs telling people what to do. It's now these are the people that live in the same area I live or are related to what I do, and actually be able to immerse themselves and get feeling and visual experiences rather than just basic facts. Now let's look at Web 3.0 and how, again, we're kind of going back to this idea that they connect to connectivist learning. In the readings, I found that Web 3.0 provides the technical foundation that allows connectivist learning to truly flourish. Let's connect a few dots within this. First is the idea of semantic AI and connectivism. Web 3.0's AI capabilities help learners identify relationships among ideas. This aligns perfectly with connectivism's emphasis on pattern recognition. Then we'll look at decentralization and learner autonomy. Web 3.0 learners can control their data and credentials. This supports self-directed learning, a key principle in connectivism, where individuals navigate their own networks of information. Global peer networks create this idea of a decentralized community and blockchain platforms that allow learners to collaborate, share resources, and validate each other's work. Students are able to interact with not just their peers, but outside sources within a safe environment to help build their knowledge, not just thinking what's going on in my one little town. This expands the learning network beyond the classrooms to that global scale. The last idea is the idea of immersive and contextual language. Metaverse environments, or AI tutors, create context-rich spaces where learners engage actively rather than passively. This fosters the kind of meaningful connections that connectivism values at its core. So rather than, replacing human teachers and just sticking kids in front of a program, Web 3.0 technologies enhance our abilities to connect learners' ideas and resources in new and intelligent ways. This directly relates back to our last unit, where we talked about the idea of keeping humans in the loop whenever we use AI. Technology is simply an extension of our teachers, not a replacement for them. We need our teachers to be able to make sure that what we're giving our students is valid, correct, and informative. But it doesn't mean that they have to be the end-all be-all. They are AI and Web 3.0 and these other programs help extend what a teacher can create in the classroom. I emphasize this with all of my teachers that I work with that want to use AI, but are afraid that if they start using it, that they're just going to streamline that process of being replaced by AI in the classroom. And I tell them, a tool can never replace you and the relationships you build with your students and the meaning you bring to that classroom. But you're one person. Using these tools to help enhance your abilities and help expand the knowledge that you can bring to your students is so essential in this global world that we live in. So let's look now at the implications of these two principles on education. The implications are far-reaching. Ultimately, educators will increasingly act as network facilitators rather than sole content providers. This meaning that as teachers, we're going to have to be more mindful of monitoring what our students are interacting with and making sure that we're providing access to verified and quality programs. Students will take greater ownership of their learning using smart tools to explore, verify, and create knowledge collaboratively. Again, this does go back to the idea of us being network facilitators, though, making sure that while the students are owning their learning, we are still making sure that they're accessing the proper information and they're not getting misconceptions. This will add into the idea that we're going to need to do quick checks and just monitor accordingly to make sure that we're letting our students explore, but that they are accessing the correct information. Credentialing may move towards blockchain-based records, allowing lifelong learning portfolios that travel with the learner. This means that data that they collect when they're in middle school, they can then take this with them to high school and to college, and they'll be able to build on their knowledge and not just learn in this one space and time and then move on from it. Also, AI-driven personalization could help every student access learning that meets their unique needs, interests, and goals. I myself have had a direct correlation with this whenever I stepped back into being a student full-time or part-time, essentially. I am dyslexic. I struggled to keep up with reading. A good majority of my students were also dyslexic. But these programs, these AI-driven programs, were able to help me maintain my grades, maintain my reading abilities, because I could take these tools and I could use them to do text to speech. I could use them to help me check my grammar or check my my spelling to make sure that I am staying in line. Having these different tools will help students that may not want to get called out directly with the fact that they have a learning disability or that they struggle, because it's going to do the adjusting for them, and then they can still keep up with their classmates. They can still participate and they can be immersed in the learning, but in a way that helps them specifically. In short, Web 3.0 doesn't just change what we learn, it's transforming how we learn, emphasizing connectivity, adaptability, and digital literacy. To conclude, I want to just kind of summarize again what I covered in this presentation. Ultimately, Web 3.0 marks a shift towards intelligent, decentralized, and user-owned internet spaces. To conclude, Connectivist learning reframes education as a process of building and navigating networks, and together they create an ecosystem where student learning is personalized, participatory, and permanently evolving to adjust to the needs of our students. I want to thank you guys for listening, and I look forward to exploring more of these technologies with you. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.